after the sensory motor stage is the preoperational stage. So Piaget's preoperational stage spans the years from 2 to 7. It's marked by an extraordinary increase in representational or symbolic activity. So the preoperational stage critically involves the development of the ability to represent information internally. And evidence of this comes from early play. So when playing with objects, children start to use one object to represent another object. So we see huge gains in internal mental representation here. The ability to form concepts in your mind is evident. Evidence also comes from advances in language. So words before this stage are usually just associated with commands or just associations in general, like mama, dada, more. And they're used because they get a response, but not necessarily because they're referring to something. So now they start learning that words are clearly used more referentially. While acknowledging that language is our most flexible means of mental representation, Piaget didn't really regard it as a major ingredient in childhood cognitive change. He believed that sensory motor activity leads to internal images of experience, and then children just label these with words. So another criticism of Piaget is that he underestimated the power of language to spur children's cognition on. So play is very important. It contributes to children's social and cognitive skills. So play detaches from the real life conditions associated with it. In early pretending, we see that toddlers use only realistic objects. For example, you might use a toy telephone to talk, or you might use a cup and pretend to drink from it. But after age 2, children pretend with less realistic toys. So now maybe you use a block for a telephone receiver. One time I was just watching Lenny play, and he had just these little building blocks that he was using, and he took one of them and he was having a conversation between these two blocks. So he takes one and he goes, "Hi, you're beautiful." And the other one says, "Thank you." Was just really cute. And that's a great example of a pretty creative play. So children, they can flexibly imagine objects and events without any support from the real world. We also see that play starts to become less self-centered. So at first, make-believe play is directed toward the self. For example, a child might pretend to feed themselves or wash themselves. But soon children direct pretend actions toward other objects. Like a child might feed a doll. Or like when Rex was born, Lenny would take a teddy bear and pretend to nurse the teddy bear. Early in the 3rd year of life, we see that children become even more detached participants. So they make a doll feed itself or push a button to launch a rocket, for example. So play includes more complex combinations of schemes the older children get. A toddler can pretend to drink from a cup, but they don't yet combine pouring and drinking. So later, children combine schemes with those of their peers in more socio-dramatic play. So the make-believe play with others is really underway by the end of the 2nd year, and it increases rapidly in complexity during early childhood. So remember, we talked about the idea of organization as a way that children learn. So schemes don't develop independently from each other, but they develop in relation to each other. Piaget described preschoolers in terms of their limitations. So these are 5 of the thinking limitations that Piaget describes: egocentrism, animism, centration, appearance as reality, and the inability to conserve. But again, please remember, children were more capable than Piaget thought. But let's go through and talk about each of these. So pre-operational thinking is characterized by the use of mental symbols and language. But one limitation we see is egocentrism, and this is the inability to see the world from another person's point of view. So preoperational children simply do not comprehend that others differ in their ideas, convictions, and emotions. Piaget's most convincing demonstration of egocentrism involves a task called the 3 mountains problem. So I posted a video showing you this task, and I would like you guys to watch it. But in this video, the 3 mountains problem involves a child, and you show them a mountain, and you ask them, what do you see? And then you flip the board, so now they can no longer see what they originally saw, but you ask them, what would I see? And this requires that they recognize they have a different perspective than the researcher. And so if they're able to describe typically what will happen is they'll just describe what they're currently seeing. And so this is really illustrative of egocentrism. But please watch that video because it's a good example. So this shows that they have really an inability to think about other people's minds. They can't get away from their own viewpoint. They're projecting their own mental state onto everything. They can't yet think about thought. Animism involves attributing life and lifelike properties to inanimate objects. So this might be like when a child says, oh, the sun is sad today, it's not shining. Another example, actually just the other day, Lenny had gotten a balloon stuck up on a light and he couldn't get it down. And so I was telling him, to try to figure it out, maybe try taking another balloon and bouncing it up to get the other balloon down. So he tries that for a little bit and he couldn't do it. And then he comes into the kitchen and he gets a pretzel and he comes back to the balloon where the balloon is stuck and he says, "Here, balloon, come and get this pretzel." So this is an example of animism, right? Because he's assuming that the balloon might be hungry and want to eat a pretzel. Another thinking limitation is centration. This is the inability to focus on more than one aspect of a task. So the inability to reverse mental operations is sometimes confused with appearance as reality. And this is where children who are pre-operational thinkers believe an object's appearance tells us what that object is. So this is especially true like on Halloween. If kids are wearing masks, it can be really scary to like 2 to 7-year-olds. And then lack of conservation is the final limitation here. So this also involves centration, so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well. Conservation refers to the idea that certain physical characteristics of objects remain the same, even when their outward appearance changes. So preoperational children's understanding is characterized by centration, which is focusing on only one aspect of a situation and neglecting other important features. It's also characterized by irreversibility. And this is an inability to mentally go through a series of steps in a problem and then reverse the direction, returning to the starting point. So I posted a video of an example of a conservation task, and this also lists several other conservation tasks. So this video shows you like this task. It also shows you this task with the pennies. So with this liquid task, this is one of the most famous conservation tasks. And so here what happens is you start with 2 equal glasses of water. You take one of them and you pour it into just a different size container that's maybe a little bit wider and a little bit fatter. And then you ask them, now which one has more? And many times children will say, well, the taller one has more, but they were equal to start with. So this is showing that they failed to conserve. They failed to realize that even though they look different, that they're not able to consider more than one dimension. So here they're kind of centrated, in a sense, on just the height of the glass. They're ignoring the width of it. they're also not able to reverse it. They're not able to, in their mind, mentally pour the water back into this previous container. So please watch those videos. What's interesting about this task, later research has actually shown that when 3 to 5-year-olds are asked carefully worded questions about like what happens to a substance like sugar when it's dissolved in water, most children actually are able to explain accurately that the drink would be sweeter even though they can't see the sugar. And so this suggests that they do have some sense of conservation. So, it just seems like maybe they use more illogical reasoning when they're grappling with a really unfamiliar topic, or they're getting too much information thrown at them, or there's contradictory facts that they can't reconcile. So again, Piaget seemed to underestimate the ability of children. So I want to end this slide by giving you this example. 3-year-old Will understands that his tricycle isn't alive and can't feel or move on its own. But at the beach, while watching the sun dip below the horizon, Will exclaimed, "The sun is tired, it's going to sleep." What explains this apparent contradiction in Will's reasoning? Hopefully you said animistic thinking.